The frontier town of Silver Creek, Arizona, in the summer of 1883, was the kind of place where a dust storm could erase footprints from a day ago, but not the whispers of its people. The town clung to the rugged edges of civilization, with wooden storefronts, a creaking windmill by the river, and streets lined with the occasional tumbleweed. People measured each other's worth by land, family name, and the size of one's bank account. In such a place, social standing was everything, and those who dared defy expectation were quickly made the subject of gossip. Among the town's social elite was Clara Whitmore, the daughter of a banker whose account stretched as far as the eye could see in Silver Creek. Clara had been raised with the idea that her future was already written, that her marriage should be a calculated transaction, secure a husband with wealth, align two powerful families, and maintain the Whitmore legacy. Yet Clara's spirit refused such confinement. Beneath her smooth skin and carefully arranged hair, there burned a restlessness that no social expectation could quiet. She spent her days in lessons with her governess, studying etiquette, arithmetic, and geography, and her evenings practicing the piano in the dim sunlight that filtered through lace curtains. The townsfolk admired her in the polite way one admires a painting in a gallery, distant, untouchable, and forever within certain lines drawn by propriety. Many had already begun to speak of her marriage to Nathaniel Hodge, the son of a prominent railroad tycoon. Nathaniel was handsome in a conventional sense, polished and polite. He followed the rules of social engagement with precision. A perfect match, everyone said. But Clara's heart beat to a different rhythm. She had grown up observing the lands beyond Silver Creek, the arid mesas, the craggy cliffs, and the camps of the Apache people, who lived quietly beyond the town. There, in a place untouched by Western greed, she found a freedom the town could never offer. She would wander for hours, sketching the landscape and practicing words in Apache that she had learned from traders or overheard from children running along the riverbanks. It was during one such excursion that Clara first met Chenoa. He was working near the stables at the edge of town, mending a fence with the care of a man who treated every task as sacred. He was tall, with broad shoulders, hands scarred from work and the harshness of desert life. His skin, sun-kissed and weathered, carried stories Clara could not yet understand. When their eyes met, there was a stillness, a quiet acknowledgement that they had recognized something kindred in each other. Chenoa's English was careful, measured, almost reluctant, but when he spoke, his words carried weight, and his smile, rare as it was, seemed to offer a quiet kind of trust. Clara, in turn, taught him to read the small words scribbled in her notebook, showed him sketches of wildflowers she had copied from the banks along the river, and listened to him speak of the desert as if it were a living entity, breathing with every gust of wind. Their meetings became routine, not in the mechanical sense, but in the inevitability of two hearts drawn together by the magnetic pull of understanding. Under the shade of cottonwoods, they exchanged words, stories, and small gifts. Clara found herself learning more about life from Chenoa than from her governess, the piano lessons, or even the suffocating expectations of her father. She learned about courage that did not boast, about honor that did not seek recognition, and about patience that could tame even the harshest sun. But as the months passed, Silver Creek began to notice. Whispers that had once been harmless curiosity evolved into mocking gossip. One afternoon, as Clara returned from the river with her sketchbook, Nathaniel confronted her at the general store. His voice carried a sharpness that echoed through the wooden walls. "Clara Whitmore," he said, eyes flashing with anger. "What are you doing consorting with a savage? Are you blind to your place?" The townsfolk gathered, some stifling laughter, others shaking their heads in pity. Clara's cheeks flushed, not from shame but from defiance. She lifted her chin and replied, "I go where my heart leads, Nathaniel, and I will not be confined by what others deem proper." The crowd murmured, disapproving, but Clara's father, standing silently near the back, looked on with a mixture of worry and disbelief. Threats followed quickly. Her father demanded she cease all contact with Chenoa, warning that continued defiance would result in disinheritance. The bankers, merchants, and social elites spoke in hushed tones, shaking their heads at her foolishness. Yet, love, once awakened, has a stubbornness that no societal pressure can quell. Clara's heart had chosen its path, and she would follow it, come what may. The decision to marry Chenoa came on a morning brushed with crimson and gold. Silver Creek slept under the early light of dawn, Unaware of the act of courage that was about to unfold, Clara donned a simple blue dress, far removed from the fineries she had been raised to wear. She carried no jewels, no dowry, only a heart full of conviction. Chenoa waited at the edge of the river, the wind rustling the reeds around him. Their vows were simple, spoken in the stillness of a world too vast to be confined by small-town judgments. When the townsfolk learned of the marriage, laughter and scorn filled the streets. "She's thrown her life away," they said. "Married a nobody." Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered that Clara had gone mad. Nathaniel, humiliated beyond measure, rode off with anger burning in his eyes, vowing revenge. Yet, as the sun rose higher over the mesas and Clara's blue dress caught the morning light, the laughter of Silver Creek could not touch the serenity that settled over the couple. Hand in hand they walked into the vast desert beyond the town, leaving behind the judgment and the chains of expectation. They walked not into poverty, as many assumed, but into a life brimming with authenticity, courage, and a love forged against the harshest trials. For Clara Whitmore, the girl who defied the town, had discovered something far greater than wealth or social approval. She had discovered a man who saw her for who she truly was, a life rich with freedom and honor, and the beginning of a love story that would defy rumor, prejudice, and even the desert itself. Even as the wind carried away the mocking laughter of Silver Creek, Clara smiled. She had chosen the path of her heart, and there in the shadow of the red cliffs and under the endless sky she had found her peace. The world might scorn them, might whisper their story in bitter tones, but love, once it takes root, blooms in ways no town, no banker, and no ridicule can ever extinguish. And so began the tale of Clara and Chenoa, a story that would soon challenge the assumptions of an entire frontier, and reveal that what appears simple to the eye may hide a fortune beyond imagination. The desert had a way of stripping a person bare, of laying them raw beneath the sun, of testing the limits of endurance and courage. For Clara Whitmore, this truth became clear the moment she followed Chenoa beyond the borders of Silver Creek. Gone were the wooden sidewalks, the gossiping townsfolk, and the neatly arranged gardens of her family estate. In their place stretched miles of red cliffs, jagged mesas, and endless golden sands that seemed to stretch into eternity. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and mesquite, and the cries of distant hawks pierced the vastness like invisible arrows. Chenoa's camp lay in a sheltered canyon, a cluster of tents and wooden structures surrounded by the rugged landscape that had been home to his people for generations. Apache children ran freely between the tents, laughing and calling to one another in a language that Clara still struggled to understand fully. The women of the camp watched her arrival with cautious curiosity, noting the delicate lines of her face, the pale skin that had never been kissed by the desert sun, and the manner in which she clutched her small bundle of belongings. Clara, for her part, felt a sense of vulnerability she had never experienced in Silver Creek, a humbling awareness that the comforts of her former life were as distant as the stars. Yet there was no turning back. The townspeople's ridicule had only strengthened her resolve, and Chenoa's steady presence offered reassurance that she had never known in polite society. In those early days, the learning curve was steep. She woke before dawn, her body aching from unfamiliar exertions, fetching water from a nearby spring, gathering firewood from the rocky hills, and learning to grind corn into meal. The sun was relentless and her hands blistered under the strain, but Chenoa never chastised her. Instead, he guided her with quiet patience, showing her how to bend to the rhythm of the land, how to move with purpose, and how to listen. Life among the Apache was not measured by social standing or wealth, but by skill, honor, and contribution to the tribe. Clara began to understand that strength did not always roar, and that courage could be quiet and enduring. She learned to weave baskets from willow and reeds, to recognize edible plants, and to track animals across the dunes by the faintest signs, broken twigs, disturbed dust, or the subtle change in wind patterns. Each small success was celebrated by the people, who had begun to call her Biyane, meaning the brave woman. The name carried weight, and Clara accepted it with humility, recognizing that bravery was not about defiance alone, but about embracing the unknown. Chenoa, who had initially been reserved and cautious, began to reveal fragments of his life to her. He spoke of his father, a medicine man who had been killed during a raid when Chenoa was still a boy, and of his mother, who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. He spoke not with bitterness but with a quiet resilience that fascinated Clara. She listened intently, often sketching scenes from his memories in her notebook, capturing not just the physical details but the emotions that lingered behind them. Despite the simplicity of life in the camp, challenges were constant. Droughts threatened the meager crops, raids from bandits were a perpetual danger, and the presence of the U.S. cavalry nearby kept the tribe vigilant. Clara had to adapt quickly, learning not just survival skills but also the ways of diplomacy within the tribe. She attended council meetings, absorbing lessons in negotiation, respect, and the delicate balance between strength and humility. Over time, her initial discomfort gave way to a profound respect for Chenoa's people, and for the wisdom that had allowed them to endure centuries of hardship. Love, too, deepened in the stark beauty of the desert. Nights were spent under a canopy of stars, the sky unpolluted by city lights vast and eternal. Fires crackled in the center of the camp as children and elders told stories of their ancestors, of battles fought and lands defended, of spirits that guided and protected them. Clara often sat beside Chenoa, her hand in his, listening to the music of the wind and the stories of the past. It was a love unshackled from material wealth, free from societal judgment and raw in its authenticity. She realized that the men who had once sought her hand in Silver Creek could never offer this depth, this connection to something larger than themselves. Yet even in this haven, the past was never far behind. News from Silver Creek drifted in with travelers and traders. Gossip carried tales of Clara's supposed madness, of Nathaniel Hodge's wrath, and of the shame her father felt on her behalf. Some letters, intercepted or delivered by the occasional messenger, hinted at threats, subtle warnings that the Whitmore name demanded obedience. Clara read these with a mixture of sorrow and defiance, but she never let them sway her commitment to Chenoa or to the life she had chosen. Her courage was tested in unexpected ways. One morning, while fetching water near a river, she came across a young boy who had been bitten by a rattlesnake. Panic surged within her, but the lesson she had absorbed over months guided her hands. She applied a remedy she had read in an old medical text, crafted from herbs and careful incisions while Chenoa and the elders watched silently. The boy survived, and Clara's actions earned her the respect of the tribe. It was a turning point, proof that her presence among them was not only accepted, but valued. Through these trials and triumphs, Clara saw another side of Chenoa, one that had been hidden beneath the stoic exterior. He was not merely strong in body, but wise in judgment and steadfast in spirit. He taught her the meanings of words that had once seemed distant. Shash bear, to water, shuhusu my peace. These words, simple yet profound, became a language of intimacy between them, a shared understanding that transcended the constraints of society. The townsfolk of Silver Creek continued to judge from afar, their laughter a faint echo across the miles of desert. Nathaniel, consumed by pride and humiliation, plodded in silence. Yet in the vastness of the canyon, amidst the rugged mesas and under the relentless sun, Clara discovered a truth far greater than wealth, reputation, or approval. That love, when rooted in respect and understanding, could thrive in even the harshest terrain. As weeks turned into months, Clara's presence in the camp became natural, almost seamless. She moved with confidence, her hands skilled, her mind sharp, and her heart fully entwined with Chenoa's. The people no longer saw an outsider. They saw a woman who had chosen courage over comfort, authenticity over social expectation, and love over fear. She had found her place, not in the drawing rooms of Silver Creek, but in the heart of the desert, in the life she had chosen, and beside the man who had shown her that true wealth lay not in gold or silver, but in the bonds of trust, loyalty, and unshakable love. Even as the sun set over the red cliffs, painting the desert in shades of fire and blood, Clara understood that she had discovered something eternal. In the wilderness, amid trials that would have broken a lesser spirit, she had learned the language of the heart, the rhythm of the land, and the power of love that could endure anything. The girl who had defied a town had now become a woman who had found her peace, her shu hoju, in a world that had once seemed untamed and unforgiving, but now sang a song of freedom, courage, and unbreakable devotion. Life in the desert had taught Clara many things: patience, resilience, and the quiet joy of simple labor. She had learned to move with the rhythm of the land, to respect the sun's relentless heat, and to listen to the whisper of the wind through the canyon. She had also learned to read Chenoa in ways no one else ever could. The subtle furrow of his brow when worry pressed on him, the light in his eyes when the camp children laughed, the quiet determination that ran like a river beneath his stoic exterior. Yet nothing could prepare her for the arrival of Eli Blackwater. The old trader appeared without warning, riding a weathered horse and carrying the unmistakable aura of someone who had seen both the lawless and the lawful sides of the frontier. His coat was worn, his hat slouched low over tired eyes, and the leather satchel across his chest seemed unusually heavy for a man of his years. Clara immediately sensed that something significant had accompanied him. A message, a warning, a revelation. When Chenoa greeted him, the recognition was brief but polite. Eli did not waste time with small talk. From his satchel he drew a letter. Sealed in red wax, the edges of the paper yellowed with age. He handed it to Chenoa with a measured look. "This is for you," he said simply. "From Santa Fe, important business." Chenoa's hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal, the words inside catching his breath before they even reached his mind. Clara watched closely, her intuition telling her that this was no ordinary correspondence. The letter was written in elegant script, words flowing in a cadence that spoke of wealth, law, and a lineage long buried beneath dust and secrecy. It was signed by Charles Pennington, a lawyer from Santa Fe, and the content revealed a truth that had been hidden for decades. Chenoa, whom the townsfolk had seen as a simple, humble Apache man, was in fact the son of Edward Whitmore, a rancher who had vanished mysteriously years ago after falling in love with an Apache woman. The revelation stunned Clara. Not only did it mean that Chenoa was of noble blood in his own right, but it also meant that he was the rightful heir to a vast estate, known only to a few and hidden in the mountains north of Tucson. The lands were rich with silver veins, water rights, and grazing grounds, a fortune untouched and unclaimed for years. Clara's mind raced as she tried to reconcile this knowledge with the man she had come to love. The irony was almost cruelly poetic. She had defied her father, her town, and societal expectations to marry a man deemed simple by all, only to discover that he was in fact of her own family's bloodline, and an heir to a wealth that rivaled anything Nathaniel Hodges' family could offer. Chenoa, however, remained calm, his deep brown eyes absorbing the implications with a patience born of desert wisdom. Eli Blackwater, sensing their shock, explained further. "There are men who know of this fortune," he said quietly. "They won't wait for you to claim it. If you don't act soon, they'll take everything. Some would kill for the land, for the silver beneath it. You need to move carefully." Clara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The world she had escaped in search of freedom and love was calling her back into a web of danger, greed, and lawlessness. She looked at Chenoa, whose calm presence was a lifeline. "We've faced judgment before," she said softly. "We can face this too." The two spent the night poring over the details of the letter and discussing their next steps. Chenoa's mind worked quickly, connecting the scattered pieces of his past, the absence of his father, the stories whispered by the elders of his tribe, the strange visits from traders over the years, into a cohesive narrative. Every memory, every lost detail, suddenly had a context, and it was clear that his life, though humble and quiet, had been intricately tied to a legacy of wealth and status that had been denied to him by circumstances beyond his control. By dawn, a plan had formed. They would journey to Tucson, claim the estate, and secure the inheritance before anyone else could lay a hand on it. The path would not be easy. The desert was unforgiving. Bandits roamed freely, and men like Nathaniel Hodge would stop at nothing to assert their claim. But Chenoa's people, his tribe, had survived centuries of threats far greater than this, and now Clara had become part of that strength. Together they could endure anything. The journey itself was fraught with challenges. As they prepared to leave the camp, Clara felt a pang of fear, not of the land or the bandits, but of the unknown. The estate, though legally hers and Chenoa's to claim, represented a world entirely foreign to them. She had grown comfortable in the rhythms of desert life where survival was tangible, immediate, and honest. Yet the promise of the hidden fortune, combined with the knowledge of Chenoa's rightful heritage, stirred a sense of purpose within her. Chenoa, sensing her hesitation, placed his hand over hers. "We do not need to fear the unknown," he said. We carry our people, our strength, and our love with us. That is fortune enough, and the rest will follow. Clara drew in a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility settle on her shoulders. The sun rose behind them, illuminating the canyon in a blaze of gold and crimson. The world beyond the desert, with its dangers and its riches, awaited, and they would face it together. Yet even as they left, the shadow of Silver Creek lingered in Clara's mind. Nathaniel Hodge, humiliated and vengeful, would surely act. Rumors of the fortune might have already reached him, and his pride would drive him to desperate measures. Clara knew that their journey was not only one of discovery, but also of defense, of protecting the man she loved and the legacy that had been denied to him. As the canyon opened into the vast desert beyond, Clara reflected on how much had changed in so short a time. She had arrived in the Apache camp as a defiant, restless girl, seeking freedom from social expectations. Now she was a woman on the precipice of claiming a legacy that would alter the course of her life, and Chenoa's forever. The simplicity she had once admired in him was no longer just a virtue. It was a strength that had prepared him for trials that wealth alone could never teach. The letter had done more than reveal a hidden fortune. It had illuminated the truth of Chenoa's identity and the depth of his character. It had shown Clara that love and destiny are often intertwined in ways that defy human understanding, that the heart can lead to paths unimagined, and that courage, patience, and loyalty are as valuable as any silver or gold. As they rode toward Tucson, the desert stretching endlessly around them, Clara felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They were no longer merely husband and wife. They were partners in a journey of reclamation, guardians of a hidden legacy, and witnesses to a destiny that had lain dormant for generations. Every gust of wind, every shift in the landscape, seemed to carry a whisper of encouragement, reminding them that though the road ahead was perilous, they were not alone. In that moment, under the wide, unbroken sky, Clara realized the truth she had always known in her heart. Life's greatest treasures are not simply silver, gold, or land. The richest inheritance is love, courage, and the knowledge that one has chosen rightly, a truth that would guide them through the trials ahead and cement a bond stronger than any fortune. And so, with the letter safely in Chenoa's hand and hope burning in Clara's heart, they set forth toward Tucson, unaware that the greatest challenges, the fiercest tests of loyalty, and the ultimate revelations of wealth and love awaited just beyond the horizon. The journey to Tucson was a test of endurance, courage, and the unyielding bond between Clara and Chenoa. The desert, once a place of refuge and quiet discovery, now presented a landscape fraught with danger. The sun rose like a relentless overseer, baking the earth and casting long, unforgiving shadows across the canyons. Sandstorms threatened to blind them. Rattlesnakes lay in wait among the rocks, and the distant peaks that marked their destination seemed impossibly far. Chenoa rode with a steady calm, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger, his hands never leaving the reins. Clara, perched behind him, held fast, her heart pounding as the wind whipped her hair across her face. She had grown accustomed to the rhythms of desert life, yet the knowledge of the hidden fortune ahead, the legacy waiting for them, added a weight heavier than the midday sun. Every mile they traveled drew them closer to both promise and peril. As they descended a narrow pass near the Gila River, the sound of hooves echoed behind them. Clara's pulse quickened as Chenoa's hand moved instinctively to the rifle slung across his back. Bandits, hired by the ruthless Nathaniel Hodge, had caught wind of the inheritance and were determined to seize it by force. A firefight erupted among the rocks, bullets ricocheting off the canyon walls, sending dust and pebbles into the air. Chenoa shielded Clara instinctively, pulling her low behind the horse as he returned fire with precise, calculated shots. Pain seared across his shoulder. A bullet had found its mark, but he refused to let it stop him. Clara, though terrified, acted with courage she didn't know she possessed, pulling a small pistol from her pack and firing at the men who sought to harm them. Their attackers, not expecting such fierce resistance from a woman, faltered long enough for Chenoa to rally and drive them off. As the bandits fled, Clara's hands shook from adrenaline, but her eyes met Chenoa's with unwavering resolve. "We'll face anything together," she whispered, and he nodded, pride and love shining through the sweat and blood on his face. The skirmish left them battered but alive, their determination only strengthened by the danger they had faced. Chenoa's wound required immediate attention, and they sought refuge in an abandoned mission nestled among the cliffs. Its walls, once whitewashed and bright, were now crumbling and scarred by years of neglect, yet within its shadowed interior, they found shelter. Clara tended to Chenoa's shoulder, cleaning and bandaging the wound with care, her hands steady despite the fear that lingered beneath the surface. During those long hours of recovery, Clara and Chenoa shared stories, hopes, and fears. Chenoa spoke of his father's legacy, the rancher who had loved freely and lived honorably despite the constraints of a world that could not accept him. He told Clara of his mother, whose memory lingered in his heart like a whispered prayer. Clara shared her own past, the suffocating expectations of Silver Creek and the choices that had led her to the desert. In the quiet intimacy of that mission, surrounded by shadows and dust, their love deepened beyond words. It was a bond forged in survival, trust, and an unspoken understanding that no danger could sever. Finally, when Chenoa's strength returned, they continued their journey toward Tucson, moving with renewed urgency. The city, sprawling at the base of the mountains, was a different kind of wilderness, legal, civilized, and yet filled with men and women whose greed knew no bounds. They arrived to find the estate, known as Whispering Mesa, already under scrutiny by claim jumpers, eager to take what they had no right to. The confrontation was inevitable. Nathaniel Hodge, whose pride had been humiliated time and again, had enlisted mercenaries to seize the land before Chenoa could claim it. The courthouse became the stage for a tense standoff. Guns rested on tables, hands hovered near pistols, and the air was thick with anticipation. Clara stood beside Chenoa, her hands dirty from desert travel, her hair tangled from wind and exertion, but her eyes sharp and unwavering. She had chosen this life, and now she was ready to defend it. With the help of Eli Blackwater and legal documents from Charles Pennington, Chenoa proved his lineage and his right to the estate. Witnesses testified to the Whitmore legacy, and the evidence of inheritance was undeniable. Nathaniel's hired guns made one last desperate attempt to intimidate them, but the law, aided by brave townsfolk who respected courage, intervened. Bullets shattered windows, dust filled the air, and shouts echoed through the halls, yet in the end, justice prevailed. Nathaniel was arrested, his schemes unraveled, and the rightful ownership of Whispering Mesa restored. The silver veins that ran beneath the estate were more than mere wealth. They were a symbol of resilience, justice, and the triumph of integrity over greed. Clara marveled at the sight of the land, at the rugged beauty that stretched in every direction, and at the knowledge that Chenoa, once thought a simple man, now held a fortune that reflected both his bloodline and his unbreakable spirit. As the dust settled and the sun dipped behind the mountains, Clara and Chenoa walked through the fields of Whispering Mesa hand in hand. Their journey had tested every fiber of their being, from the harsh desert and deadly bandits to the legal and social battles that awaited them. But through it all, they had emerged stronger, united and unshakable. Clara's thoughts drifted back to Silver Creek, to the laughter, ridicule, and judgment she had endured. The same townsfolk who had once mocked her now stood in awe, some humbled, some ashamed, all witnesses to the power of love, courage, and destiny. Yet she did not gloat. She knew that the real victory was not in wealth or vengeance, but in the life she and Chenoa had built together, a life of shared strength, respect, and unwavering devotion. That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, Clara and Chenoa sat by the fire outside their new home on Whispering Mesa. The desert wind carried the scent of sagebrush and cedar, the gentle murmur of a distant creek, providing a lullaby that spoke of peace earned through trials. They spoke little, their hearts already entwined in a language that required no words. Chenoa took Clara's hand, pressing it to his chest, and she felt the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm as enduring as the land itself. In that moment, Clara realized that the fortune they had claimed was more than silver or land. It was the wealth of experience, courage, and love forged in the crucible of adversity. Every hardship they had endured, every risk they had taken, had led them to this place, a place where they could finally be free, together, and secure. The desert, once a place of isolation and testing, had become a sanctuary. The trials of the journey had transformed them from lovers defying a town's judgment into a formidable partnership capable of facing any challenge. And as the fire flickered and the night deepened, Clara whispered softly to Chenoa, "We have faced the worst, and yet here we are." Chenoa's reply was simple yet profound. "The desert taught us. The stars guided us and our hearts led us. We have everything we need." And in the silence that followed, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote, Clara understood the truth of their journey. Love, courage, and integrity were riches no fortune could surpass, and together, they had claimed both the hidden treasure of Whispering Mesa and the greater treasure of a life built on trust, devotion, and unbreakable bond. The months following the court battle at Whispering Mesa were a time of both triumph and quiet reflection. The land, once a hidden secret, had become the foundation for a life that Clara and Chenoa could finally call their own. The silver veins beneath the estate promised wealth beyond imagination, but it was the life they built above ground that held the greatest value. A life woven from courage, love, and a shared understanding of what it meant to endure and prevail. Silver Creek, the town that had laughed at Clara's choice, now seemed almost a distant memory. Word of Chenoa's inheritance and the justice they had won had spread across the frontier. Those same townsfolk who had mocked Clara and dismissed her husband as simple now watched from afar, their pride humbled, their assumptions shattered. Some arrived at Whispering Mesa, hesitant and awkward, offering apologies or bows of respect. Nathaniel Hodge, humiliated by his failed schemes, had vanished from the town, his pride forever tarnished. Yet Clara did not return to Silver Creek to gloat. She felt no need for validation from those who had once scorned her. Her heart belonged to the land, to Chenoa, and to the life they were shaping together. Every morning she awoke to the sun casting golden light across the mesas, the wind carrying the scent of sagebrush and cedar. Birds called from the cliffs, and the distant mountains held secrets of centuries, as if the land itself acknowledged their victory. Life on Whispering Mesa was both hard and beautiful. Clara rose with the sun, helping Chenoa manage the land, tending to crops, overseeing repairs, and learning the finer details of ranch management. She had become skilled with tools and horses, her hands no longer delicate but strong and capable. The Apache women who had taught her years before returned occasionally, sharing knowledge and stories that bridged her past and present, reminding her that she had become a part of something enduring. Chenoa, for his part, embraced both his heritage and the responsibilities of his newfound wealth. He treated the land with care, understanding its value not only for what it could provide, but for the history and legacy it carried. Under his guidance, Whispering Mesa became more than an estate. It became a home, a sanctuary, and a symbol of perseverance. Children from nearby camps and towns would come to learn the ways of the land, to understand the respect and skill required to thrive in the harsh frontier, and to witness the example of a man who had defied every expectation and emerged victorious. Evenings were filled with quiet intimacy. Clara and Chenoa would sit by the fire, watching the stars emerge one by one, their hands entwined. The desert night was alive with sound, coyotes calling in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the mesquite, the occasional rush of a breeze across the cliffs. In those moments the world fell away. There were no townsfolk judging, no mercenaries threatening, no letters from distant lawyers. There was only the land, the sky, and the life they had fought to claim together. The couple often reflected on the twists of fate that had brought them here. Clara remembered the early days when she had fled Silver Creek, the ridicule of Nathaniel, and the tension of stepping into an entirely foreign world. Chenoa thought of his childhood, the loss of his father, and the mysterious absence of his mother. Each had journeyed through hardship, and each had emerged stronger for it. Their love, tested by danger, prejudice, and adversity, had proven unshakable. Children began to arrive at Whispering Mesa, laughter filling the once silent canyons. Clara and Chenoa guided them, teaching both the wisdom of the Apache and the knowledge required to thrive in the modernizing frontier. The couple had created a new world, one that bridged cultures, honored heritage, and embraced the future with open hearts. The land itself seemed to reward their diligence. Crops flourished, springs ran full, and wildlife returned in abundance. One particular evening, as the sun dipped behind the mesas in fiery brilliance, Clara stood on a hill overlooking their land. She saw the farmhouse they had rebuilt, the corral filled with horses, and the distant figures of Chenoa, and the children tending to the silver-rich fields. Her heart swelled with gratitude and love. She had traded societal expectations for a life of authenticity and freedom, and in doing so, had discovered a fortune far greater than wealth alone, a life filled with purpose, courage, and devotion. Chenoa joined her, taking her hand in his. "We have what many spend their lives chasing and never find," he said quietly, his voice carrying the calm strength she had fallen in love with. "A home, a family, and a heart that is true," Clara smiled, leaning into him. "And the world," she replied, "can keep its silver and its judgments. We have the richest treasure, each other." They stood together in silence as the last rays of sun painted the desert in shades of crimson and gold. The wind carried the promise of tomorrow, a life built not on fear, greed, or approval, but on love, courage, and shared destiny. Every hardship they had faced, every challenge they had overcome, had led them to this moment on a life of peace, fulfillment, and happiness. Whispering Mesa became a legend in its own right. Travelers spoke of the couple who had defied expectation, faced impossible odds, and emerged triumphant. Tales of Clara and Chenoa inspired others to follow their hearts, to seek justice, and to value love over social standing or wealth. The estate itself, rich with silver and history, stood as a testament to resilience, honor, and the enduring power of the human spirit. In time, the couple's children grew strong and wise, embodying the union of two worlds, the courage and wisdom of the Apache, and the determination and intellect of Clara's lineage. Clara often found herself marveling at the beauty of it all, the laughter echoing through the canyons, the glint of silver beneath the mesas, and the steadfast presence of Chenoa, who had been the rock of her heart from the moment they met. As the seasons passed, Clara understood a truth she had long suspected. The greatest fortune in life is not measured in silver, gold, or land. It is measured in love that withstands trials, in courage that faces adversity, and in a heart that chooses authenticity over convenience. She had risked everything, and in return she had gained a life of immeasurable richness. One night, as the desert stretched endlessly under a tapestry of stars, Clara whispered softly to Chenoa, her voice carrying the warmth of her love. "Xiu Huju," she said, "my peace." Chenoa pulled her close, his arm around her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "And my forever," he replied. In that embrace, amidst the vast unbroken wilderness, amidst the whispers of the wind and the distant calls of night creatures, Clara and Chenoa found the ultimate treasure, the fortune of the heart, a life together forged in love, courage, and an unshakable bond. Their laughter mingled with the desert breeze, a sound that no shadow, no prejudice, and no greed could ever diminish. The world outside might continue to judge, to scoff, and to question, but on Whispering Mesa, Clara and Chenoa knew the truth. They had everything that mattered. The hidden fortune of silver beneath the earth paled in comparison to the love, the life, and the legacy they had built together. And as the first light of dawn broke across the mesas, painting the desert in hope and promise, their hearts beat in perfect harmony, ready to face every sunrise together.